With great excitement, I introduce you to Northwood University, a truly exceptional institution in American higher education. Since 1959, this private, accredited university has been a vibrant bastion of free thought and enterprise, standing out among the thousands of other schools in the U.S. Known as America's Free Enterprise University, Northwood is dedicated to nurturing the next generation of leaders who drive global social and economic progress. At the heart of Northwood lies the Northwood idea, a philosophy that celebrates individual freedom, responsibility, and the importance of moral law and free enterprise. This entrepreneurial spirit is evident in that 1/3 of Northwood alumni own businesses. Northwood is more than an institution. It's a movement that empowers students to think critically and champion liberty. It is a rare gem in today's academic world. If you're passionate about supporting a university that values intellectual growth and free enterprise, or to learn more about its academic programs, visit northwood.edu.
Hi, everybody. This is Saad. I have a repeat guest today and a very special guest, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Welcome back. How you doing?
Gad, it's very nice to see you. Thank you for having me on.
Let me just mention your bio. Then I want to get into this guy for a second because I saw something on your website. So hold on. I got some good stuff for you. So okay. you are the research fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford, founder of the AHA, Ayaan Hirsi Ali Foundation. You host a podcast by your name. Many books: The Caged Virgin, Infidel, Nomad, Heretic, The Challenge of Dawah, and your most recent one was Pray, Immigration, Islam, and the Erosion of Women's Rights. Anything we need to add before we proceed?
That book is coming. The last one, Pray, is in the process of the paperback coming out, and with a new introduction, a new foreword. It's an attempt to update what happened between 2020 and now, because 2020 everything was closed down. That was when I published that book. But unfortunately, the subject of the book, which is sexual violence against women, who perpetrated by men who come from Muslim majority countries, and men that are not necessarily Muslim, but who come from societies where women's rights are not protected. They are wreaking havoc on the streets of the West, and that's what Pray is about, and the silence of the so-called feminists.
And oftentimes it's not the silence, it's rather arguing vociferously against those who are trying to protect the rights of women, right? So it's not just silence. Oftentimes there is an obfuscation to explain away the things that are happening, which makes it even worse. Before we jump into all this, I said that I would mention Orwell. Now, the reason I know about your love of Orwell, because I went to your foundation's, I can't remember if it was at the foundation's website or your own personal website, where you had listed a bunch of books that you love. The top two were 1984 and Animal Farm, or at least the top two. Now, so this is the authorized biography of Orwell, but this is now going to make you jealous, Ayaan. Are you ready? It was my 60th birthday on Sunday. And thank you. This is where you say you don't look a day over 41. Yes?
You don't look a day over 41.
First edition Animal Farm.
Ooh.
First edition 1984. That's one of many gifts that my ridiculously lovely family gave me. So are you jealous?
I am jealous. And I won those sooner than my 60th, which is not too far away.
All right. So where do you want to start? Should we start with, I think the last time you were here was in May 2022. So it's been about 2.5 years. So if we do a State of the Union address for the West, have we regressed? Have we improved? Give it to us, Ayaan.
The answer is both. We have regressed, and the regression is now manifest on the streets, on our campuses, everywhere. Let's say, to go on from the conversation we had in 2022, but there's also progress, and that makes me very, very optimistic, especially in the United States. there is a blowback underway, and it's a good one. I'm just really heartened by the fact that men, and in particular white men, and even African American men, are standing up to all this BS that's against them, the conspiracy to steal their civilization and the legacy of their ancestors. I am so happy that they're standing up and they're saying, enough of this. We don't want any of this, and that they're conspiring to put a stop to it.
Okay, so I would love to share your optimism, and I wake up every day. I'm a jovial guy. They call me the happy warrior, but I'm not seeing the same level, or I'm not picking up the same level of optimism that you're picking up. What is it that you are seeing specifically that suggests that there is an autocorrection taking place?
Is it because you're in Canada?
Well, certainly being in Canada, number one, being in Montreal, number two, being at Concordia University, number three, maybe makes me a bit more pessimistic. But I think many of those realities are spreading across Canada, to your point.
Well, I think geographically it really matters. It matters the social surroundings you are in. So one of the things that I really find heartening is Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley in 2022 was either part of the problem or they were indifferent, or it seemed as if they were indifferent. Twitter was owned by someone other than Elon Musk. And it's wonderful how we forget their names. I have no clue who that is. Jack Dorsey and somebody
Jack Dorsey, who unfollowed me, by the way, on Twitter. He had come on my show. We were very friendly, but somehow he's now pressed the unfollow button. Oh, well.
Yeah. So that was back in 2022 when there was, we had the events of 2020, and then it was, so this thing is going down the drain. Universities are going down the drain, corporations are going down the drain, K-12 schools are going down the drain, and people seem to be standing only on the sideline and complaining. And I remember going from one event to another event, from one podcast to another podcast, and all we were doing was complain. But there was never a concerted effort. There was no demographic that stood up and said, okay, we're going to put an end to this. And then the tech bros came along, led by people like Elon and Mark Andreessen and Peter Thiel, who was in the fight for a long time anyway. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but Balaji, Srinivasan, Michael Solana, these are all, by the way, really young men. They all, when I say young, or younger than me. And they've stopped being indifferent, and they've realized that they're part of the problem, and they're angry because I would say the smartest demographic we have. And they've decided that they're going to stand up to, first of all, identify who it is that we're standing up to, and then stand up to them. And then surprisingly, I'll say also Wall Street is coming out. You've seen the actions of people like Bill Ackman. Mm. And if you then, there was this narrative, it's the rich against the poor, that plays into the hands of the Marxists and the Leninists and the woke. And it's awful. I hate that. So we had to find a way of defending our free market society and our constitution and our Bill of Rights and our legacy, and at the same time touch on the problems that, this enormous gap in wealth that's only increasing in America presents. We have to talk honestly about that. So I think now it makes it easier by saying, look, rich people are not a monolith. Yes, there are people who game the system. There are people who don't care as long as they're rich and they have fences around them. They'll go along and pretend to be woke. But here we have some of the wealthiest, smartest people in the world who are standing up for the poor, for the dispossessed, for the silenced. And it just makes me, it makes me very, very optimistic. It makes me appreciate the genius of the American founding fathers, that they came up with a system. Every time an attempt is made to take away freedom of speech and enslave people, you find Americans who stand up and fight this thing. And if you look at the characteristics. I mean, I'm talking about the superficial skin color is what the woke like to focus on. You see, it's across the board. It's Black people, it's white people, it's men, it's women. I mean, you followed the trajectory of Vivek Ramaswamy.
Sure.
I don't know if he's 38 years old or 35 years old. He looks like he's 25. But that's the son of an immigrant. And it's people like him. And then I know you probably will not agree with everything that the former governor of, is it North Carolina or South Carolina? Nikki Haley.
Right.
You don't agree with everything she says, but that's the daughter of an immigrant. I just saw a video of African Americans for Trump, or African Americans didn't want to be scolded by Barack Obama, and the way they talk. And there was one line there that says, "We're not going to vote for you or this woman Harris because you're not putting America first."
Right.
And these are the descendants of slaves who are saying this. They want America first because they know instinctively and in reality, America is the best place to be Black, to be woman, to be gay, to be white. It doesn't matter what. And that's why you have literally the whole world wanting to come and live here. So I have so much to be optimistic about. I also find with your fellow Canadian, Jordan Peterson, that there is an attempt to resuscitate the Judeo-Christian principles on which Western civilization is founded. And Western civilization is unimaginable without these principles. And so there's an ever-growing group of people, intelligent people, who are standing up and who are saying, yeah, we can identify exactly what the civilization is about. And we appreciate what it has done. And again, it's a mixed group of people. It's not just what they say, white, male, and stale, and all that. It's everyone. And I couldn't be more optimistic. And so that means we have a fighting chance.
Right. Well, from your lips to God's ears, they say. Were you surprised by the post-October 7th orgiastic global Jew hatred that we've seen? Now, before I cede the floor to you, let me kind of give you a bit of a setting for it. So we both come from an environment where we certainly would understand what Jew hatred is, and we're immigrants, so we appreciate the values that the West enshrines and so on. But even for someone like me who escaped the Middle East, I was taken aback that the response of October 7th, right? I always give the following analogy when I'm trying to explain a phenomenon. Take, for example, your weight. On any given day, based on the decisions that you make that day, only one of three things can happen to your weight. It can either go up, it can stay the same, or it can go down. There is no other possible state of the world. So after October 7th, only three things could happen when it comes to Jew hatred. You could either empathize more with the Jews because, wow, this horrible thing happened. Jew hatred can stay the same, or it can go down. Well, I must admit that to my surprise, I was astonished at the level of unleashing of Jew hatred. I'm sure that that's been your experience too. What can we do about it? What are your thoughts about it? Because I'm scratching my head saying, boy, I think it was better when I lived in Lebanon than when I live in Montreal.
And unfortunately, there are a number of Jewish friends who have already said to me that they feel safer in the United Arab Emirates than in, for instance, London, Paris, or New York. I mean, that should shock us and that should humble us, right? So a number of things. One, the explosion in Jew hatred it's shocking. It's shocking to see people out on the streets in the most advanced societies that had promised not so long ago, never again, to watch hundreds of thousands of people come out and chant from the river to the sea, or Intifada, or that there is only one solution. I mean, really, these are genocidal slogans for the people who know what they mean. So shocking. Is it surprising? I think it's not so surprising. Again, go back to 2020, and that for me was the main shock, is to wake up to how our society had degenerated, and the level of degeneration, especially amongst what we call the elites. That's the people who are educated, right? University students graduating from places like Columbia and Harvard and Penn, and just almost every university, Stanford, every university in the United States. I don't think it's any different in Canada, perhaps even worse. And then across the Atlantic, again, seeing the same things, to say, wow, this went, it was as if the carpet was torn from under our feet, and reality came really fast. Now, in hindsight, there were always things, there were signposts. And for me, the signposts of the radical anti-Semitism that we are seeing now is the way the anti-white narrative was developed, the anti-white male narrative. And it was tied in Europe to the concept of decolonization, and in America, Northern America, to the concept of slavery and racism. And the way those things worked together, and watching constantly bringing Israel, injecting Israel into everything. So you would see a Black Lives Matter protest, and they would be protesting white cops or cops killing or arresting or mistreating Black men. And you would say that's a straightforward issue. But then you would see and hear anti-Israel slogans, anti-Zionist slogans. Suddenly there would be something about BDS. And there would be the use of these terms, settler colonial. And just you keep hearing that word, settler colonial. And you would pivot away from what's happening on the domestic scene in America in the confrontation between Black men and police. And now you're talking about we can only have justice if the Zionist state is eliminated. So if you were in the university world, that's what you've been hearing for years and years. And then it came out into the open in the spring of this year. And so how can I then pretend to be surprised?
Right.
I'm not surprised. I'm shocked.
Yeah. Well,
now,
I mean, sorry, forgive me for interrupting. I argue that there are three sources of Jew hatred. There is the one that you're just enunciating. So if I went to Near East studies and political science programs at Harvard and Columbia, then there is a particular narrative that makes me very much have animus towards the Jew, towards Israel. So that's sort of the academic progressive left. Then there is kind of the neo-Nazi right that will also write to me Jew hatred stuff, Jews won't replace us, and so on. And then, of course, the third one that we're both intimately familiar with also
is the Islamist.
Is the Islamic one, right? So right now, you know, in the past, at least I could wake up on a given day and say, okay, today I'm getting hit by the neo-Nazis. Whereas now, in any direction I turn, Ayaan, they're coming at me. So, so continue.
I was at an event in Springfield, Massachusetts last month, and someone there, a rabbi, was making a comparison between the neo-Nazi far-right anti-Semitism and then the one on the far left. And he said the far-right one is like a heart attack. You know it's going to kill you. You know what to expect. And then the far left one was like this chronic cancer or like a chronic disease.
Right.
It's there and it comes, you know, in the name of justice.
Right.
And that's also, I think, one thing, you know, when you're within Jewish communities, it's like, how can you not see, how can you not peel back all this language of justice, this nice sounding stuff, and see this thing for what it is? It's a real monster. But a lot of Jewish people got beguiled into thinking that by joining the woke, that they were fighting for the rights of Blacks and women and gays and transgender and so on. So I think the far left anti-Semitism is the most dangerous because it recruits Jewish people, and it uses some of the most basic principles of the Jewish faith, such as justice, to market itself. And I think if you think about subversion in general, and maybe we'll come to talking about subversion, it is, you don't have to go around spending a lot of money or blood or treasure in demolishing your enemy. You just find out what his weaknesses are, and you use those weaknesses against him. And I think the left has perfected that to a certain extent against the West, against Jewish communities in Israel, against women. So women, if you look at almost all the famous, well-funded women's organizations, it's this language of inclusion that is used against them. You know, we should open the borders. Any sane woman knows that open borders mean trouble for women, but you can't find any feminist movement against it. So this is the thing that's so insidious about the left, is that they can convince you to take part in your own demise.
Yeah, I'm not saying this for self-promotion on my show, but it's relevant for the conversation. So in the parasitic mind, what I'm arguing there is that our cognitive system, our thought processes, can be hijacked by ideological rapture, causing us to say hashtag, open borders, refugees welcome. In my forthcoming book, Suicidal Empathy, I continue the story by then arguing that our emotional, our affective system can be hijacked. So now it's the perfect cocktail, right? Because we are both a thinking and feeling animal. If I can, to the word you use, subvert, if I could subvert your cognitive system and then hit you with a double whammy with your emotional system, I've won the war and I didn't have to fire a single shot. What do you think of that?
That's exactly right. And I think, you'll go back to philosophers like Hegel. I've been reading Karl Popper, and he says, go back as far as Aristotle, even Plato. And so it is this, but Hegel really is the one who left us with this legacy of rekindling tribalism. And then the emphasis on the feelings, as long as, subjectivity taken to an extreme. And the reason why I'm optimistic about fighting this thing back is Western society cannot function if it abandons objectivity and if it abandons reality. So growing up in a clan society, for instance, everything was objective. It's all about intuition and feeling and sizing things up. And, someone who cannot read or write, like my grandmother, had all this intuitive wisdom, learning through a great deal of hardship. And that was admired. And part of why is that people become so cunning and deceitful, and that's how you survive in a very harsh tribal context. You know this better than I do, but the tribe by definition is genocidal, because hey, if either you survive or I survive, it's a zero-sum. Resources are scarce, and so there's this constant cycle of violence and hostility, and you learn to survive in that
ecosystem.
So what the West is doing now is they've imported all these people who come from that ecosystem, where they know how to be on top when it comes to subjectivity. And the West developed over a long time these rational, objective systems. And so in the West, there is no West if there's no objectivity. And it's so, you should write a book on it. I don't have the time. I wish I could. But I'm so glad that we're now becoming aware of the deception that is in words like decolonization. And words like all this blame that's heaped on the West, and you find Western man's pressure points, and especially the guilt he feels towards being affluent or towards living. It's really inheriting a society that has a good story to tell and a bad story to tell. And we come in and we tell you this bad story and we keep pushing at these sensitive areas and you fall for it over and over again. But there is no affluence for anyone if we abandon objectivity, objective truth, if we abandon science, if we abandon the open society. So I think that those of us who understand this are going to come up, and we will be from the West itself, and also we will be immigrants who can tell you precisely why these societies that are based on subjectivity keep failing over and over and over again. So if the West becomes tribal, the West becomes subjective, and then the West becomes like everyone else.
Right. So, I mean, that's why, by the way, of all of the parasitic ideas that I've discussed, to your point, I say that postmodernism is the granddaddy of all idea pathogens, because it is the one that allows all of the other parasitic ideas to flourish and catch on. But okay, so let's suppose we can build a mind vaccine against all this imbecility. Okay, fair enough. But then what do we do?
So can I say it's not we have built it. We have built. So this is again what makes the West unique is we have built this mind vaccine. We just haven't been applying it. Then we surrendered the universities to those subjective, go on. I think the fight is not a fight of can we come up with something new. I think the fight is one of how can we restore what we have and we're about to lose.
Yeah, fair enough. So, okay. Whether we already have the vaccine or we deploy a new one or set up new mind vaccine centers, that's all great. And that's what I spend most of my day doing. But there is another problem here, which is, and obviously you're aware of this, but for our listeners and viewers, the old maxim that demography is destiny is truly apt, right? I mean, you are the sum of the people that make up your society. And if we all share the exact same foundational values, then we have a great society called the United States or the West, whatever. And if we don't, and if we start losing that, then all of the mind vaccines in the world are not going to reverse that. So now in the West, one of the parasitic ideas is all refugees welcome. Everybody has hey, Elon Musk is an immigrant. Why are you a bigot, Saad? Why, all immigrants are equally likely to assimilate. Now, that idea pathogen and cultural relativism has resulted in the influx of millions of people that do not share a single one of our foundational values. So even if now people have woken up and will put an end to that immigration pattern, isn't the cancer already here and irreversible? I mean, how do you get the millions of people that are already in your society, short of deporting everybody who doesn't share your values? How can you fix that problem, Ayaan?
I think because it's a multi-pronged problem, it requires a multi-pronged solution. I think we should be making our own babies. We should not be outsourcing baby making to third world countries. And in order to do that, I think we have to reverse this toxic relationship that has developed between men and women in general in the West. And to do that, that means we have to talk about the unintended consequences of feminism. There are all the good things about feminist fights for the emancipation of women has been amazing. And I tell you, every day I am one grateful woman to be in the West for all the things that we have achieved, men and women. But I think somewhere, I don't know, we took a left turn and now we are almost off a precipice because men and women are talking past one another and a narrative is developed that it's like the tribal, the men tribe and the women tribe, and it's zero sum. And if you want to advance in life, you have to take something away from a man because he's taking it away from you. I mean, it's just really sick. So we've got to bring back a healthy relationship between, and this is generally speaking. By the way, talking of optimism, I'm talking to a lot of women right now, young women, Gen Z women, who are very much aware of this and who want this and who were able really to identify where things went wrong, and they don't want any part of that cancerous feminism of hostility towards men. So the thing is, we have to love our men, we have to cherish them, and we have to protect them, and then they'll protect us. And there's a great deal of wise women who are now coming to that understanding. If you kill all testosterone, you'll be someone's slave.
Exactly right. I know that you. I'm sorry. Go
So
ahead.
I said it was a multi-pronged. So that is. Then, of course, the immigration issue. This is part of the subversive efforts to destroy the West. And the people who are saying they want to destroy the West, you don't have to think in conspiracy theories. They say it, they write it, they're all over the place. We have to dismantle critical race theory and critical theory, all this neo-Marxist stuff. It's out there. They say it's just like the way I talk about the Muslim Brotherhood. You don't have to second guess them. Don't listen to me, listen to them. And so I think you have to ferret out all of these ideologies, bring them into the open, expose them, and fight them with counter narratives, which I think we can do. I think people who love, I love America, you love Canada, and so on. We've got to get up and get our hands dirty in the sense that we need to get involved in politics. Again, to go back to the tech bros, all they wanted to do was innovate and build and not have anything to do with politics. And if politics came their way, they would, write them a check and they'd be left alone. And they've discovered that that's not how it works. Politics will not leave you alone. So I think we have to start doing exactly what open societies were built for. And that was participation of the electorate. We have to take part in this process, which is the fight for power. And we will fight for power, and it's not unchecked power. We want our power to be checked, but it's for the preservation of the systems that we have. We can reform the systems, but we don't want to dismantle them. And I think we have to express that. And one of the systems that we ought to expressly stand for is the nation state and its nationhood. And if you have, which is what we have in the West, a weakened idea of what nationhood is, you will go along with the nonsense of opening the borders and letting everybody in.
Well, by the way, Justin Trudeau, if you remember, said that Canada is now a post-nation entity, right? We are now a globalist construct, and therefore there is no such thing as Canadian values to speak of. So to your point, that's exactly, by the way, that started with his dad, who instituted the political philosophy of multiculturalism, not to be confused with the idea of having a pluralistic society where I can eat Somali food or Ethiopian food or Greek food. That's great. That enriches a society. But multiculturalism as a political philosophy, we're now seeing its consequences in Canada.
I know what multiculturalism is, but thank you for clarifying it for the audience. I think that when you say post-nation reality, it really is a euphemism for tribalism and for subjectivity. And for ideologies, Marxism, socialism, revolutionary socialism is a form of tribalism. Again, go back to Hegel and what he argues for. So post-nation state is post-Hegel. Sorry, it is it's tribalism. And it's primitivism. And it's a return to subjectivity. This is where multiculturalism also, anything goes. You are not supposed to compare these cultures and say this one is superior to that one because all cultures are equal. That level of moral relativism leads to the guillotine. It leads to genocide. It leads to a decay. It's awful, and that's really what they want.
Yeah.
So part of it is to expose what they're saying. And it's so important to have someone within Canada stand up to Trudeau and have him actually go and live among tribes people so that he can discover for himself what it is like.
Let's send him to Mogadishu for a holiday. I'll pay for it. Will you join me in paying for him to go to Mogadishu for a month?
I'll pay for Justin Trudeau to go to Mogadishu for a month.
Okay, I know that you were fortunate enough. I never got the pleasure of meeting Christopher Hitchens, and I think it was him who had said that, Islam can only continue to flourish as long as women, I'm paraphrasing his words, I don't remember his exact words, as long as Muslim women go along with it. The day that the Muslim women say, we're done, then the whole thing collapses. Is that, in your view, the most direct way to defang and soften Islam through creating a narrative that allows Muslim women, to have the courage to say, no, we're not doing ABC anymore?
Mm-hmm. I think here I will disagree with Christopher and say, if you want a radical change to a civilization as old as Islamic civilization, we're talking about 1400 years, it'll have to come from the men of Islam. And it'll have to come from those men adopting an attitude of critical thinking and redirecting their energy from the objective of achieving societies that live under Sharia law to societies that adopt secular law. Now, to say secular law doesn't mean that they have to throw away their religion, but they will have to throw away the political aspects of their religion. And I can see the UAE seems to want to go that way. Even Saudi Arabia, under this crown prince, wants to go that way. God, in its most simplistic way, Islamism says life in the hereafter is more important than life on earth. And therefore, if you want to have a good place in eternal life, life after death, you have to engage in the jihad. That is to give infidels, non-Muslims, offer them the Sharia, and if they reject it, then offer them either death or life as, inferior peoples. What I think the UAE and Saudi Arabia, they have made a choice. They understand that better than you and me. They're steeped in Islamic faith. And I think in their actions, they seem to have made a choice to say, no, we want to build for life on earth. And hence you see all this materialism, and they have curbed the powers of the Salafis and the Wahhabis. Unfortunately for us, the Wahhabis and the Salafis, hiding under the banner of the Muslim Brotherhood, have established themselves in the West. And so now they're flourishing in the West more than they're flourishing in their countries of origin, where they've been banned and they've been told they're taken down a notch or two. So is it women? I'll say, if Mohammed bin Salman decides that he's going to allow women to go to school, finish school, work and keep their jobs, and participate in shaping the future of Saudi Arabia and by extension the Muslim world, then I think that's what Christopher Hitchens really meant, was then things will change. Giving Muslim women agency is going to change the Muslim world for the better. But the agency has to be given to them by men, and men have to continue to protect women's agency.
Do you, I can't remember if we spoke about this the last time you were on the show, but do you hold out any hope that there could be a doctrinal reformation of Islam, so that, that particular passage that said kill, 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 we reinterpret it as meaning kill with kindness? Or is the whole Reformation project a complete waste of time?
So no reformation, no change is going to come from the ground in any Islamic context unless it is accompanied by force, and unless it's also enforced by force, overwhelming force. So again, to stay with Saudi Arabia, why Saudi Arabia? Because it's the most important Muslim country in the world, more important than Iran. 5 days, 5 times a day, Muslims face Mecca. That's 1/5 of humanity. So that country is very important. If again, Mohammed bin Salman and his circle decide to define what Islam is and then enforce it, then it's going to be what they define it to be. If they decide to review the Quran and say, look, some of what's here is historic. If they decide to review the legacy of the Prophet and say, we've got to read this stuff in historic content, and we're going to decide how we've got to go with the times and live with the times. If they then say some of these very basic scriptures are never to be practiced again and enforce it with power, I will say that's going to be much more lasting than if you only round up the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood and throw them in jail and behead them and exile them. Because as we've seen from previous decades, that has happened over and over and over again. The Islamists have been jailed, they have been hanged, they have been massacred, and they have a way of coming back over and over again. You know, Al-Qaeda is supposedly destroyed. ISIS is supposedly destroyed. Even the Muslim Brotherhood is kicked out of office when in 2012 they adopted office in Egypt. But the ideas that they build on, as long as they remain in the Quran and as long as they remain in the Hadith and in the Seerah, then they're going to lead a life of their own. And so we need the leadership of Saudi Arabia and the other Arab countries that have been negatively affected, Muslim countries that have been negatively affected by this, to come together and say, we are going to determine now exactly, we are going to define Islam. And what we leave out is to be left out, and we're going to enforce it. And I think then we have to collaborate with the whole world, because radical Islam threatens nearly every place where it has established itself. Now it's more of a threat to the West than it is to Arab countries. So in that sense, I think it is this I believe that it has to be a global effort to come together and say, we are going to tackle the ideology. That means we're going to remove the content from children's schools and textbooks, from high schools, from universities, from the media, from religious circles. This all has to be audited almost. And I know precisely what needs, and I think you do too. We know exactly what needs to be removed and put in a museum and say that's where it belongs. And now we choose for a life on earth, and we're going to build for a life on earth. It will be amazing. There'll be peace between the Jews and the Arabs, and it's going to last, because then the Arab energy is going to be redirected from spending it all on hating the Jews to all on loving themselves and their children.
You know, I've said the exact same thing, that, you know, because I come from the Middle East, and I mean, there are so many elements of who I am that are Arabic, right? Arabic is my mother tongue. We listen to Arabic music. We eat Lebanese food. And so there are ways by which I could interact both with my Jewish heritage and my Arabic heritage without taking seriously, you know, I don't take something that's in Deuteronomy seriously. So there are ways by which you could be fully immersed in a pride of your history, your Islamic history, Islamic architecture, Islamic thought, Islamic philosophy, Islamic poetry, and that's fantastic. But you defang those elements, to your point, whereby I'm not losing my identity as a Muslim by giving away, you know, the Jewish hatred and so on. And then you could open up the human capital that exists. And I mean, you know this. I mean, you know, you've lived, I think, in Saudi Arabia, haven't you? Is that?
I did. Saudi Arabia. Islamists came to Somalia and they came to Kenya, and they're everywhere. So they followed me everywhere.
But, you know, there is such, you know, the culture of hospitality is so beautiful in the Middle East, right? The way the language is, the poetry, the way guys speak to each other. When I try to explain to someone who speaks English, the way that men will you know, how can I help you, my love? But this is a man saying to another man in a very poetic. So there are so many beautiful elements to that culture that if we can unleash it without all of the negative stuff, you'd have a complete renaissance in the Middle East that would be mind-blowing. Okay, a few more things, because I'm looking at the time and I've only got a few more minutes with you. Are you prepared to talk at all about the November 5th meeting that we have in the United States? Or do you not usually talk about politics? Or do you?
Oh, but this one is so consequential that I talk about it because
Okay, so take it away. Give us your thoughts. Give us your prediction. Give it to us, Ayaan.
yeah, well, it really, to me, it boils down to this. The Democratic Party is not the Democratic Party of Bill Clinton. It's not the Democratic Party of the moderates. And Kamala Harris, for me, represents the woke. And that is why she's having a hard time moving to the middle. You know, poor woman, she's being asked all the time, can you give us what you really think? Or if she does that, it's either what she really thinks, which is woke. I mean, no one has asked her yet in all of those friendly interviews that she gave, hey, Kamala, what's a woman?
Right.
She won't answer that question. She can answer that question in a way that either satisfies the moderates and then she loses the radical left, or the other way around. She satisfies the radical left and she loses the election. And so far, the questions she was getting on the economy, on the Middle East, on all of this, she ducks, but she sort of leans towards the woke side. And so I think she's going to lose herself the election. And think of the Democratic Party as a machine. And I think this machine is trapped. They're trapped by the radical fringe wing, what used to be the fringe. And the only way forward, and it's very important, Gad, a democracy cannot function as a single party entity. We need the two parties. So even if the GOP takes government now, they are the governing party, and we need an opposition. We need a viable opposition. So for me, the best thing is for the Democratic Party to lose, and not lose by a little margin, but lose in a landslide.
Like a Reagan win kind of thing.
Yeah, you need a Reagan win for the other side, and you need huge loss for the Democratic side, because that's going to force the Democrats to have this inner confrontation that they didn't have, the internal confrontation they didn't have in 2016. And again, they didn't have it in 2020. But sooner or later, that kind of reckoning has to come. And you have all these different factions within the Democratic Party. And one faction has to come on top. And I hope it's the moderate faction that says, you know, we are pro the American Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and we are not going to rename, you know, days of the year. We've just had Columbus Day, they call it Indigenous Day. Get rid of that nonsense. We're not going to get rid of the Electoral College. We are not going to park the courts. We are the Democratic Party, and we want to be here to preserve the Constitution, and then, you know, take part in the loyal opposition to the people who are in government, and that's how our system is supposed to function. And the same applies to the Republican Party, by the way. But yeah, on November 5, if the Democrats lose, I hope what follows is an autopsy, a proper autopsy, a real reckoning. And then, of course, on the side, they'll have to be able to do the opposition as well. If the GOP win, I think they have their work cut out for them, because these three key issues, the economy and immigration / the rule of law. I mean, crime is out of control. Inflation, those are the things I think that they'll be focusing on. And then right now there are two wars. So whoever takes office in January is going to have to deal with what's going on in the Middle East and in Ukraine. They're going to be too busy to do anything bad. I don't worry about Donald Trump. What was it that they worried that he was going to be a dictator? I'm not worried about Donald Trump being a dictator.
Oh, but a lot of our common friends, I won't mention them, have said that no, but their prediction that he'll be a dictator still holds true. He just chose to not implement it during his first term. It's only during his second term that he'll show his Hitlerian colors.
Trump derangement syndrome. It's it's a form of denial so that you don't see your own problems, you see. And the people who are saying these are the people who think they see the problems within the Democratic Party, but they think they're too big. And the problems within the Democratic Party are major. I mean, it really is, we need a proper reckoning. I don't think we can function without the Democratic Party, but the way this is supposed to go is for the Democratic Party to. Did you see Bill Ackman's 33 points?
I didn't see the 33 points, but I love the fact that he's coming around to thinking rationally. So I appreciate that.
So I think with leaders like that, when you get, lifelong Democrats coming out and saying there's something wrong with our party, not just how we message. Unfortunately, in 2016 and in 2020, they put all their money and hope on messaging. And they thought if only we paint the other side as radioactive,
right,
then our problems will go away. So, Donald Trump is a felon, Donald Trump is this, Donald Trump is that. And they neglected really doing the work that they should have done in 2016. In 2016, after Obama's second term, suddenly someone out of completely nowhere, Donald Trump, who had no political history, won the election. And they didn't look, there was a lot of commentary on why that happened. There was a lot of commentary on the forgotten man and the forgotten woman. There was this speech that was given by the man who made Fahrenheit 9/11.
Oh, Michael Moore.
Michael Moore. So there were very loud voices within the Democratic Party who were saying, hey, this process of globalization that profits only a small subset of the population, it's going to lead to trouble. And they didn't pay attention to that because they thought, and I remember sitting in on some of those gatherings where they said, well, it's not just, globalization is unstoppable. It's not just immigration. There's also automation that's coming on. But the reasons that were given over and over again were reasons of there's nothing to do about it.
Right.
And now I think we're going to find out that actually there is something to do about it. Again, it makes me optimistic. It makes me optimistic that the Democratic Party will lose this election.
Okay, last question, because I'm looking at the time. Any projects that you're currently working on, a documentary, a new book, anything that you'd like to use this opportunity to promote? Take it away.
I'm launching Carriage Media.
Carriage Media?
Yes, it's based on the success I've had with Restoration, which is on Substack. And there's just a demand for more than just writing articles, a demand for interaction. So launching or again, relaunching my podcast. But I almost want to say there's a demand for courage. We just want people to stand up wherever they are and, come away from the conformism. The saying that's now almost becoming a cliche, bad things happen when good people do nothing. Yes. And so that is really what Courage Media is all about, is inspiring, trying to bring people on that can inspire the audience to think, okay, she did it or he did it, I can do it too.
Beautiful.
And I'd love to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much. I would love to anytime. I'm at your disposal. Thank you so much for coming on. Stay on the line so we could say goodbye quickly offline. This should be up hopefully in the next couple of days. What a pleasure to see you. And we might be seeing each other in person in end of November in England.
Wonderful. I look forward to that.
Thank you. Cheers. Take care.
Cheers. Thank you.